Hello everyone. We are going to look at the time of Edward the First. So we'll be looking at around 3 to 4 Edwards, and this is the first of them. So who was he? So here is his picture, Edward the First. So he was also known as Edward Longshanks. Why? Because he was very tall. He had very long legs. So he was also called Edward Longshanks, and also the Hammer of the Scots, because he was really able to defeat Scots and keep them at bay. So that was the reason why he was also known as the Hammer of the Scots. And he had the support of the barons. And after being crowned, he knew that if he had to be a strong king, he had to rule wisely and well. So he was pretty efficient, and he visited every corner of the land, and he knew what was happening at the grassroots. So he expelled the money lending Jews from England in 1920. This was one of the most popular measures undertaken by him, and the business of money lending was now taken upon by the less hated Italians. Jews, they were kind of universally hated. I mean, we can also say that there was this anti Semitic kind of racist thing there, but we're not getting into the politics of that here. He is also called another English Justinian because of all the laws that he had enacted, and he had got these laws duly approved by the parliament. So there was validity to whatever he did. So these are some of the laws that were enacted by Edward the First. And when you look at history, you can see that it had very far-reaching implications. So the first Statute of Westminster, this gave the king some kind of financial freedom. It allowed the king to have a regular income from a tax on the export of wool and leather. So he did not have to depend on the parliament and the nobles for every little expense. So that gave him some kind of financial freedom and stability. Now, this Statute of Mortmain, it declared that the churches should not be gifted with land and other endowments without the license of the king. So whatever was happening in the church in terms of financial dealings had to be reported to the king. So this again curtailed the power of the church. So he could keep the church within limits. And this Statute of Acton Bernal, it gave power to the merchants to confiscate the lands and assets of their debtors. Now the second one had very far-reaching consequences. That is the Second Statute of Westminster, which said that ancestral properties should pass from fathers to the eldest son, only to the eldest son. Why? Because this would prevent the estates from breaking into small shares, and this developed the spirit of adventure among the younger sons because they did not have anything to wait for, right? So after coming of age, they had to go out into the world and they had to find their own way. So this led to the birth of trade and colonies because these young adventurers, they were ready to take on the world. So they got into all these voyages, exploration, and this led ultimately to the birth of colonies and the rise of the British Empire. The king, he also ordered a thorough comprehensive survey of the land, and this was just like what William the Conqueror, William the First, had done during his time, right? You remember the Domesday Book. Likewise, the survey that was carried out during his time, all that was written down on these scrolls and parchments, thick scrolls, and they would be rolled and kept. That's why they called the 100 rolls. Okay. Now, during his time, the parliament developed into a more mature body. So, the first contribution was towards the enactment of laws. The second was the development of the parliament. So now parliament evolved. So during the time of the Anglo-Saxons, we had the Council of the Wise Men called the Witangmot. Then you had during the Normans the Concilium Magna. Now, during the English, that is after that, when the whole population had become more or less homogeneous and English in nature, you have the development of the Parliament. So if you look at history, it would tell you that the first two, that is the Vitangomod and the Concilium Magna, they were merely advisory bodies. They didn't have much power. Whereas Parliament, it adopted measures to control the king. So it had more say in the governance of the land. So if you look at the etymology of the word parliament, it has its origins in the word parler, French, meaning to speak. So it's that place where people get together, speak, discuss, and debate. So this was a legislative and executive body with great barons, clerics like bishops, the knights of the shires, and two representatives each from the big towns and cities. So it represented the people of the land, and the knights and the townsmen, they were represented in their they represented their communes, that is their group. So that ultimately developed into what is today known as the House of Commons. So earlier, the parliament was just a fund granting body, a body to grant funds to the king. And the High Court was where the king redressed the grievances. So, with time, what happened? The parliament took upon these functions. So, first it was a court of justice, then it was a tax granting body, then it was a debating council where national policy was discussed and formulated. And Edward had called this parliament in 1295, which is known as the model parliament, because it had representatives from the barons, the clergy, knights, and representatives from the towns. Now, this parliament, the model parliament of 1295, was attended at the Westminster Hall, and this was summoned to sanction funds for the king's military expedition to France and Scotland. Why? Because he had to settle scores with them. The King of France, he had sacked and burned the English port of Dover, and he had also incited the Scots to rise in revolt against Edward under their king John Balliol, that is the Scottish King John Balliol. But the Parliament did not sanction much money. A little bit of money was given, and both the battles were unfavorable for the king. So, and the victory that he had was a hollow victory. The victory at Scotland was pretty hollow. So now the parliament had not sanctioned the kind of the amount of money he had expected, hoped for, right? So he was pretty disappointed with that. So again, there was another parliament which was summoned in 1297, and this was to finance the military expedition to recover this area of Gascony. Now, Gascony is in France. So now, one section of the barons under the Earl Marshal of England, they refused to comply and listen to the king. So the parliament broke up in disorder, money was not sanctioned. So what happened? The king, he obtained money by taxing people without the approval of the parliament, and he went on his military expedition. So this was a big blow to the barons. They disapproved of the king's actions. So now a meeting was held of the barons wherein they cancelled king's new taxes. They cancelled that. So now the terms of Magna Carta were enforced, and the king's son, the next king who would sit on the throne after him, Edward II, he was made to agree to the demands of the barons. So on his return, Edward had to listen to and abide by the decisions of the barons. So you can see how this whole concept of parliament was becoming stronger by the passing of the day. So now we had already seen the king was also engaged in what you call the conquest of both Wales as well as Scotland. You know, there were continuous skirmishes between these two regions, these two areas. So Edward, he realized that the French Angevin Empire that was there, it could not be restored again. So you remember Gascony was lost, and he wanted to go and reclaim that. He knew all that was lost. So what happened? He turned his energy to the conquest of Wales and Scotland. So he tried to stick to England, and then he started looking towards areas closer home, that is Wales and Scotland. And Here we just take a detour and we remember how William the Conqueror had created three earldoms along the border. That is the border between England and Wales, known as the Marcher Kingdoms, and the lords were called the Marcher Lords. And this was done to safeguard England. So you have Chester, Shrewsbury, and Hereward there. And whenever there was a strong king on the throne, it meant peace in Wales. Otherwise, there would be unrest and infightings. So now Wales, under their leader, a very strong leader, Llewellyn the Great, they got into a treaty with Henry the Third. Uh, so after Llewellyn the Great, you had another ruler, Llewellyn ap Gruffydd. He united the whole of Wales after a period of strife. So now here you have a very powerful ruler ruling over Wales. So what happened during his time? He refused to pay homage to Henry III because he supported Simon de Montfort, and he had the support of the barons who opposed Henry the Third. So here we have the picture and something like a statue. You cannot really call it a statue of Llewellyn ap Gruffydd of Wales. So now, when Edward became the king, Llewellyn continued with the same policy of not paying the homage. Just he had done towards his father, that is Henry the Third. So now Llewellyn he was defeated by Edward the First, and he was made to sign this Treaty of Conway in 1277. So he had to stop all his conquests and he had to pay a huge fine. But this was not acceptable to the independent Welsh people. So there were lots of rebellions here and there, especially under David, who was Llewellyn's brother. Now Llewellyn was killed in a battle, and David was imprisoned and later executed. So now the Welsh, they did not have a strong leader, because of which they were beaten into submission and they came under England. So now this policy, this custom of this title of Prince of Wales was revived. It was revived because in between it was kind of, it was not in use. So it was revived and it was conferred upon the heir apparent, that is the eldest son of the monarch of England. And after Welsh came under English, the English king began or continued with the policy of non-interference. So they would not interfere in the daily functioning, the customs and traditions of the land. That is, Welsh language and customs traditions are preserved and guarded fiercely even today. And they continued to live in amity. And the Marcher Lords, they continued to form that border between Wales and England. Now, what about Scotland? Now, Scotland, like if we go back in history, we can see both Wales and Scotland had been this land of the refugees. Whoever were running away from persecution, either political or religious, they all found some kind of a space there, right? So Scotland was also a land of the refugees. But these Scottish people, when you look at them, they're very aggressive, and they were very strong. They were all the time trying to create trouble to English, if you remember, right from the beginning. You remember the two walls that were built, trying to safeguard English from the Scots, remember? So a strong English king would mean they would be quiet and peaceful and would not try to attack. Just like it's politically accepted or politically done everywhere. So if you have a very strong ruler, others would not dare to defy you or try to attack you. So likewise happened here also. And when you look at the kind of connection between Scotland and England, they also enjoyed close connection because one of the queens of Scotland was English. So that goodwill was there. And but then what happened after the death of this particular king, King Alexander of Scotland? This cordial relations waned, and he did not have any male heirs. And the only claimant to the throne was his daughter's daughter, that is his granddaughter, Princess Margaret of Norway. So Edward, he suggested that this girl, she marry his son and unite the two kingdoms. So she was brought back from Norway. So, but on her way, she was drowned in a shipwreck and she died. So it did not happen the way Edward had suggested. So now they would two claimants to the throne of Scotland. One was John Balliol and Robert. The other one was Robert Bruce. Now Edward he arbitrated between them, and John Balliol was crowned the king. Now Edward he started considering Scotland as his fiefdom, and he demanded that the Scottish king come and sit in the English Parliament as Edward's vassal, that is someone under him. And he wanted John Balliol to provide troops to fight in Gascony in France. And then he also said that England would be the Supreme Court hearing cases filed against the Scottish High Court. So these many conditions were put forward, but then this was not acceptable to the Scots because it was like asking for too much. So here we have uh, pictures, portraits of John Balliol of Scotland. So now, what happened? These Scots they were really angry and they were not willing to accept the conditions put forward by Edward the First. So they turned against Edward and they sought the help of France. So now this led to a series of wars, and in one of them, John Balliol he was deposed and he was killed. And Edward was so angry with them that he unleashed death and destruction upon the Scots. Now, at that time, we know we can see the rise of an ordinary knight, William Wallace. So he was a very strong, brave leader under whom the Scots came together, and because of him and the support he enjoyed, because and the support he enjoyed from the other Scots, what happened, they were able to defeat the English. So they had victory, they got this victory at this battle of Stirling Bridge. But then what happened in the next battle, Wallace was defeated, and he was defeated, and then Robert Bruce he proclaimed himself the king of Scotland. And then what happened? Edward and his son Edward the second, the first and the second, they marched to fight the Scots. So there was a new king on the throne of Scotland, Robert Bruce. But then on the way, what happened? Edward the first, he fell ill and he died. So the mantle was on his son Edward the second. So what did he do? He returned without striking a single blow. So he didn't do that. So now Robert Bruce was on the throne of Scotland. He consolidated his position as the king of Scotland, and under him there was this major battle between England and Scotland. That was the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. So this can be seen as one of the final and last encounters between these two countries. And Bruce he defeated the English, and the king, the second king, that is Edward the second, Edward the first son, he fled for his life. He was a very ineffectual king, in fact. So now Bruce he was succeeded by his son David, who was followed by his sister's son Robert Stewart, and later history would tell you that the Stuarts would play a very important role in English history. So with that, we come to the end of Edward the First. So Edward First had died before the Battle of Bannockburn.